Welcome to Alleghany Memories. I am Suzanne Irwin, and on behalf of the Alleghany Historical Genealogical Society, it is my pleasure to welcome you to these episodes of interviews with older folks in our area. Each episode is an oral history archive featuring personal remembrances about life during the Great Depression, the wars, and other life-defining events that will be of interest to you and to learn what sculptured the lives of those who participate in these interviews. And during these interviews, we will encounter the ideas, the goals, and the faith that defined a way of life which is our common heritage. There are no scripts. The people who share these remembrances can choose their interviewer and be comfortable in telling their stories in their own words. And the interview can also be conducted in a place of their choosing, perhaps in the comfortable presence in their own home. On behalf of the Alleghany Historical Genealogical Society, we encourage your participation, and if you know of relatives or friends who have special remembrances, we welcome you to contact us and join us in this enriching project.
Yeah. My name's Sharon Davis Hamilton. I live in Florida, but grew up here in Sparta. But we're here today to talk about my mother, Thelma Davis. She's 96 years old, and she's got a lot to tell about this area. Mother, what's your earliest memory of this area?
Well, my earliest memory, growing up in Alleghany County with my dad, my mother, my two sisters.
And where did you grow up?
We grew up in the Turkey Knob community near Piney Creek. Turkey Knob community is about 3 miles east of Piney Creek on a little 40-acre farm in a log cabin.
That's pretty neat. And what do you remember about your grandparents? Do you remember them?
Oh yes, I remember my grandparents. My grandparent on my father's side was Alec and Letitia Osborne. They had several children. My dad was an identical twin. He had a twin brother, Andy.
Did they have fun together?
Oh yes, they had lots of fun dating together and fooling their girlfriends.
What do you mean they fooled their girlfriends? Did they switch identities?
They'd switch their dates, and the girlfriends would know the difference. My grandparents on my mother's side was Barton and Cornelia Hoppers. He was a magistrate and a farmer. We loved to go see him because we liked to hear trials when he was trying people for whatever the magistrates have to do, and lots of times performing weddings. And we also loved to go there in the summertime and can enough peaches to last us for a winter. They had a big peach orchard too.
So what happened in your early childhood years while you were out on the farm in Piney Creek?
Well, when I was about 4.5 years old, I guess, my Uncle Ben came to live with us to go to Turkey Knob to school. At that time it was an academy, and my older sister Maggie walked with him to school, and at that time I was about 4.5 years old, I guess. Then after he had lived with us for a year, he went to Dublin the next year to school, and we started going to and that left Maggie at home to walk by herself.
Maggie was your older sister.
Oh, yes. Then my mother decided she didn't want her to walk by herself, and she'd send me to school with her to keep her company. So
you were 4.5 when you started school?
I was 4.5 when I started school. And my first teacher was Maxine Parsons. Maxine Parsons was a very sophisticated lady. Most of the time I sat on her lap and she read stories to me, and she took me home with her a few times. And one of the things that I was so interested in was her old Edison Victrola, which had tubular records and a big speaker. Now the next year, then when I started school.
Was that when you really started to school, when you were supposed to start to school?
I started school when I was 5 years old, I guess. Anyway, I skipped the first grade because I'd already been taught the first grade. So I started in the second grade.
And then I think when you graduated from high school, you were about 15, weren't you?
Yes, I graduated from high school then when I was 1 month past 15. That was the first year that, I guess that was the last year that you graduated with 11th grade. They went to the 12th grade after that.
Well, you went to school, to elementary school at Turkey Knob. But then what happened when you got ready to go to high school?
Well, when we got ready to go to high school, my mother, she was faced with what to do with us, where to send us to high school. And she was a very independent person. She was determined that we get an education. So she moved to Sparta and rented a house to send us to high school down there. But my dad wouldn't go with us. He was very supportive of my mother, but he wouldn't go with us. He decided to stay home and farm and let her go to Sparta.
So you were in Sparta, and your father, my grandfather, was up in Turkey Knob. So what would happen on the weekends? Would you see him?
Oh, he would come down to get us on the weekends with a wagon and a team of horses to take us home for the weekends, bring us back to Sparta. And they did that for about 2 years, I guess.
What happened after 2 years?
After 2 years, then he decided to come down to Sparta with us and work and get a job down there. So he got a job janitoring at the school where at $40 a month, I think, is what they paid him. That was different from today's working it.
So what year did you graduate from high school?
I graduated from high school in 1931, and at a little past 15. And Mr. Charles R. Rowe was our principal. Mr. Rowe, we had 16 in our class, and our class motto was, "By our own efforts we hope to rise."
What was special about that class?
Well, we had a controversy about what to graduate in. Up until that time, they just graduated in their best clothes, and Mr. Rowe decided that it would be nice to have caps and gowns. So Mr. Rowe persuaded the class to wear caps and gowns. And that was the first year that the graduating class from Sparta had caps and gowns for graduation.
So after you graduated from high school, what did you do then?
I went to Appalachian State Teachers College. My mother was very supportive of us going on to school. And in fact, teaching was a good thing for women at that time. Not a lot of jobs for teachers to get, really.
You mean not a lot of jobs for women to
I
get,
mean,
right?
for women to get, except teach. And I went, you didn't have to have a degree to teach at that time. You had to have a certificate, though.
How long did it take you to get a certificate?
Well, I got a B certificate in 2 years. And then in I was married to Sam Richardson when I was 18 years old. And I started teaching in 1935. Sam and I were married in 1934. Then when I started my teaching in 1935, I was married to him until 1943, when he was killed in a car wreck. So in 1943, after Sam was killed, I left teaching and went to New York Institute of Photography to study portraiture. So after studying, I came back to Sparta and put up a little studio.
And what was the name of that studio?
Thelma's studio.
Where was it located?
Oh, it was located on Main Street down next to B&T drugstore and for what is now the museum building.
So how many years did you do photography?
I did photography about 2 years, and then I married your dad, Earl Davis, in 1947, and at that time he wanted to go to school on the GI Bill, so I decided it best to sell the studio and go back to college. So we both went to college. Then
Did you go back to Appalachian?
I went back to Appalachia and got a degree. Got my degree after going to school in the evenings and Saturdays and summer times. Mostly I taught, then during my years of teaching, I taught 5th grade, 3rd grade, combination 1st and 2nd grade.
The first year you taught, do you remember what the salary was?
Well, the salary when the first year I taught was $68 a month.
That wasn't very much.
No, it wasn't very much, but you know, $68 at that time went about as far. I remember that we bought I had bought a bedroom suit the first year I taught for about $79. So things were different then.
Oh, that's for sure. That's for sure. Well, tell us what you taught. You said you taught 1st and 2nd grade, and you taught grades ranging from 1st to 6th. But you taught 5th grade more than any other.
Right.
But what else did you teach?
Well, in 1959, Miss Clyde Fields, our superintendent, applied for a program for exceptional children. Mostly people considered them mentally, well, they called it educable, mentally retarded. And that she asked me to take the class. At that time, I hadn't had any experience whatsoever with teaching retarded children. I had 18 children, from the 4th and 5th grades, Piney Creek, Little Pine, which is now Glade Creek, and I had to do my own testing, which was a challenge. Later, the psychologist from Raleigh came and verified that I did the testing okay or I didn't do it okay. I didn't have any assistant. 18 children with no assistant was a pretty hard job.
Mother, when you were teaching and you had to do your testing of your students, explain to me how you did that testing.
Well, the way I did the testing to get them, whether or not they were qualified to go into the class, the state gave me a test and taught me to give the test correctly. Then, whenever they had a chance, they sent a psychologist from Raleigh to check it out to see that I had done it correctly. And so I really had to test my own students until they were later verified by the psychologist.
Okay. When you were teaching in the educable mentally retarded program, a lot of times you had children that came into the classroom that I remember that, especially in the wintertime, that didn't come in clothed properly.
Okay, yes.
Can you tell me about that?
Well, yes. Many times we had them coming in and they were not clothed properly, and we kept close at school and changed them into different clothing when they came to school. On one particular day, a little girl wore these shoes into school. It was a snowy, icy day. The temperature was 29 degrees. And of course I was concerned. And I called John Miller, our principal, over to check out the situation. And he immediately told me to go to town, get her some new socks and shoes. And we certainly didn't let her go home with the same shoes.
So what did you do with these shoes? How did they become like this?
I later decided I wouldn't throw them away, and I had them bronzed and put on this. But that was as a child from a very poor family, of course.
So what are you going to do with the shoes at this point in your life?
Well, at the present time, I intend to give them to the Alleghany Historical Society for them to use with their educational display.
Good, good. That ought to be interesting for people to see. Tell me what kind of community projects were you involved in during your time, both before you retired and after?
Well, after I married your daddy, we decided to go to the Methodist Church. It wasn't very hard to make the decision because that was his decision. He was a Methodist, and he was going to stay a Methodist. So I was involved in teaching Sunday school and involved in the Women's Society, involved for a time as historian, helping with Vacation Bible School, and so forth. In addition to that, I worked with mental health, and later I got involved with the ADAP program, Association for Retarded Children, of course, and the ADAP program. The ADAP program I stayed with for a number of years and was secretary to the board. The board, some of the members on the board, Brian Edwards, chairman, Eldon Edwards, Clarence Krause, Dwayne Davis, Charity Gamble, different ones, others. So we started, that board started working for a building for the ADAP people to work in, and we worked at all that for several years before we got it.
So where's the building located now?
Well, the building now is located, well, it's on Health Street, and it's located over next to the, it's not New River Mental Health now, it's the new company, but I don't know its name.
The Mental Health Center.
The Mental Health and the State's Health Center too.
When they dedicated the building that they built for ADAPT, what did they do at that point? Do you remember?
Well, if I remember, I guess they hung my portrait in the dining room.
And they also named a street after you, I think. Didn't they call it Davis Lane?
Or something.
I think they did.
I don't remember.
I think there's a
That's
street
right.
over by ADAP called Davis Lane in her honor. What was the happiest moment of your life?
I guess the happiest moment of my life is when you were born.
Well, thank you, Mother. Tell us about the changes you've seen in Sparta and Alleghany County during your lifetime.
Oh, that's numerous. When we first came to Sparta, Sparta had many old homes up and down the street, colonial homes, and none of those are standing now. They were, at that time, they decided to turn them into filling stations. Filling stations was the idea, and of course the streets are different, and all the buildings have been remodeled. Or since then, Sparta's had 2 fires, and about everything destroyed by fire, a couple of times. I guess at one time about everything was destroyed from Wamba Street out to the theater, which is now Alleghany Jubilee. And the buildings that haven't been rebuilt, but I mean a lot of buildings that have been rebuilt and remodeled, and so on.
What about factories and things you didn't have factories back?
Oh no. Well, all the plants like Troutman and Haynes and that were here then, they're closed. Of course, we have Magnolia. We used to have a shoe factory. It's closed and operating as something else now. I don't remember what it is. And I can't think what they have, the one over that the Bland Bottomley bought for his Christmas tree business.
Did you have Christmas trees here when you were young?
No, that's a new industry that's just come in the last few years.
What did people do with the land? Just mainly farm the land?
They mainly farmed the land until our tobacco, they grew tobacco, a lot of tobacco before the Christmas tree business came in. How did we have fun growing? To tell you the truth, we didn't have much fun growing up. And when I say that, we lived out on the farm until I was 10, when we moved into Sparta, and about all there was to do was go to the movie. You didn't have swimming pools and Krause Park and all that.
You hoed a lot of corn when you were young, didn't you?
Yeah, we hoed a lot of corn. The history of the Methodist Church, I said I was historian, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. This Methodist Church, I think that it goes from 1889. It was in the Holston Conference until from about 1889 to for a few years, and then it was in the Mount Airy Conference. Then it went back to the Holston Conference, and the Methodist Church was made a station church. It was a member of about, well, all the churches in the county. Although Shiloh was really the first Methodist. No, Mount Zion is the oldest church in the county, but Shiloh has a long history too. But our Methodist church here in Sparta became a station church in 1951, and Jesse Johnson was the first pastor. Dr. Bill Steele was here the longest time.
Well, all the Methodist churches, there were several of them in the county
Oh,
and
yeah.
they were all together at various times.
Oh, yes. I guess they were all together until 1951. From 1889 to 1951. There was Antioch, Sparta, Shiloh, Piney Creek, and Cox's Chapel. Well, I had some friends when I was working at the ADAP. I had friends that had the whole history of all the Methodist churches, and I borrowed those books from them, and that's how I got the history and had them copied, and that's how I got the history of all the churches in the county.
Dwayne Davis says that you told him it's time to make these copies, and he didn't have a whole lot of wiggle room. He said, "Yes, ma'am."
And you know that Dwayne did not tell me that he was having them put on tape, which is a really good. It was so really good of him to do that, so the churches in the county could use it, mm-hmm. because they couldn't go through all those books. So Dwayne I told him he needed to be recognized.
Okay. Mother, there was a church behind what's now Osborne Memorial that was called New Bethel Church of the Brethren, that you remember.
Oh, yes, I remember that.
And how old were you?
I was about 6 years old at the time. That was a little church on my granddad Osborne's property, and all my family belonged to that church. I thought it was Bethel until a few, Burton Osborne, my cousin, reminded me that the real name was New Bethel Church of the Brethren. So.
Tell me what the church looked like inside.
Well, the church, it was just a small little church with a wood stove and shelves on the wall for the lamps to sit on. And Reverend Will Handy was the preacher. Soon after that, it was moved to Twin Oaks, to the New Haven Church of the Brethren.
And how did the women come to church?
Well, the women came to church with little lace bonnets, little lace, white bonnets on their head with lace around them.
And what did the men do at church when you were a little girl?
The men kissed, and when I asked my dad why the men greeted each other, by shaking hands and kissing, he said, the Bible says to greet thy brethren with a holy kiss. That was the reason for that. Then after the discontinued services there, many years later they had a pastor to come back and run Bible school there. That was where I was first introduced to any religion.
And what year do you think? Well, if that was when you were 6 years old, then that would have been like in the early 20s, right?
Oh, yes.
So what's happened to that little church now?
It's no longer in use.
But is the building still standing?
I think so. I think now they use it to hang tobacco in, or used to.
Okay. Mother, let's talk about when you had Thelma's studio and you took pictures of local people here in Sparta. And to talk about this, let's ask Jeff Halsey to come join us for this discussion.
Okay.
Hi, Jeff.
Hey, you had a studio for 2 years in the 40s.
Yes.
And you shot pictures of who?
Oh, I have no idea, but I have a book that has all the names in it, and I also still have the negatives.
So here's your book.
Okay.
And if we go to, let's see, G here.
Okay.
Tom Green, Bob Gamble.
Okay. This was a little book that I just kept to inform me that this person was that all of the G's, and so that I could know where to keep how to get back to the negatives and the proofs in case they wanted some pictures later on.
Now you don't have the original pictures only, you've got your original negatives.
I have the original negatives and the proofs, and the only pictures I have are just extra prints that we made at the time.
Proofs and extra prints.
An extra print, yes.
In the 40s, when you had your own studio, you didn't just go and shoot the pictures, you developed them and did all the development?
Oh yes, I developed the negatives and I printed the pictures.
And you had a 5x7 camera that you were cutting and shooting in halves?
Yes, right.
That's just great to me. I love that. These photos, you're going to make them available for the Historical Society, and folks that want to have prints of them will be able to make prints for them?
Yes, I certainly will. I'll be glad to share them with the Historical Society.
Well, that's like a treasure to us right now.
Okay.
To be able to scan these pictures and put them into our digital archive that we're working on.
Well, I'll be glad for you to do that.
Well, great. We hopefully then in the near future we could put it into the newspaper, the names of the folks that you have negatives on, if that's all right with you.
Well, I have most of the negatives a few that I've already given out, a few that I've given out to people.
Well.
And that's maybe, but so I'll be glad for you to use them.
Well, that's just great. We thank you. On behalf of the Historical Society, I certainly thank you.
Well, you're quite welcome.
Okay, that's good.
We do hope that you have enjoyed these episodes and that you will continue to watch these wonderful interviews of folks that you might know. And so again, watch and learn.